All right, I'm Travis Mills, the co-writer and director of Texas Red. This is the commentary track for the movie. Right next to me, I have.
I'm Nick Murphy. I played Graham Herring, deputy sheriff.
I'm Herman J.R. Johnson. I played the Oklahoma Kid.
I'm Damon Burks, one of the associate producers, and I play the National Guardsman.
I'm Dorsey Carson, and I play the sheriff, John Millsaps Johnson.
The movie opens with this juke joint scene, and it's probably one of my favorite scenes, top 5 scenes of any movies I've ever made. And I want Herman to talk a little bit about how we put it together, but it was totally unique because we filmed out in this little private bar, rural Mississippi. But what was different about the scene is that instead of directing the extras to go here or go there, I just told them go in the space, get your fake drink, and start to have fun and ignore that there's a camera there. So all of the action you see in the scene isn't directed. It's just people being themselves, which I think there's no way I could have directed this and made it as authentic as it is. Herman, what was it like that night doing that?
It was very exciting, first off, because it was the first night of filming for myself. So I was on cloud 9. The energy in the juke joint that evening was very genuine and authentic. The way everyone came alive. Again, you didn't really give us much direction besides telling us to be ourselves. And the way people came together, it almost made me think about like, man, this must have been what it was like when like my great grandfather was here. You know, because my grandparents' family is from Mississippi, and you know they could have easily been a part of this story. They're from the same areas, but the juke joint was a very live and popping situation for the film, and I think it was a good introduction to seeing how the Oklahoma Kid and Texas Red friendship was.
Yeah, the world that they had and it created before it all falls apart, right? Because you got to see some of the positives, I think. But I would like, I don't know if I did it to you, I definitely did to Cedric. I'd like run up to you real quick, whisper something in your ear, and then disappear behind the bar, right? Because I'd be like, go dance with that white girl.
Yeah, you did tell me to do that. You was actually sitting under the bar.
Yep.
In like this little, I don't even know how you fit in there.
Right.
There's a little small box that you was in the crib. It's like, psst, look like.
The fun part too is this whole part with him calling the guitarist, calling Red out to play. I didn't tell Cedric, we'll talk about Cedric in a bit, I didn't tell him I was going to do that. I gave him no warning. So I just went up to the guitarist and I said, in about 30 seconds, you ask Red to come play a song. And of course, Cedric Burnside, we should say this, is a blues singer from a blues dynasty. And he's a Grammy-nominated, musician. And so this was all improvised, him playing that song.
And the guitarist that actually called out Texas Red Cedric Burnside in the film, his name is Ontario Showers. He's no slouch either.
No, he's great.
He's mean with the guitar, he can sing, and to my knowledge, he plays other instruments as well. He's a very talented brother.
Yes.
Cedric knew what to do with the guitar.
Exactly.
As soon as he picks one up.
Yeah, he improvised in the scene and then just went with it and ended up being pretty great. But we shot this, there's probably a solid hour of us shooting this. Remember, we shot this whole thing. What it boiled down to like 5 minutes is an hour of footage. You could literally make almost an entire movie of just them hanging out in the juke joint, which I was tempted to do. But
and I think the fact that, Cedric plays this part so well, I think, and in part because, he's the grandson of R.L. Burnside, the famous blues musician here. There's no doubt R.L. lived the blues. And there's no doubt that Cedric picked up on that throughout. And in this movie, he's living it.
Well, it's evident in his music, and he grew up around his grandfather, right? So, yeah, I think he picked up a lot from it. This was an interesting scene to film. We got to talk a little bit about the horse riding. So we did a horse boot camp with Herman and Cedric. Cedric was afraid of horses before we started this movie. He had a bad experience with a horse when he was growing up, and then Herman, had you ridden at all?
No.
Okay,
No,
so
not
you
at all.
you weren't afraid, but you were
Right.
total novice.
Right.
They did pretty good in boot camp, but of course, as we know, training is sometimes different than execution near the shot. Well, in this scene, the shot coming up where they ride off, and one take, the last take we did, Herman's horse didn't want to come back. It wanted to go back to the trailer, and he couldn't control it. So right here, he just takes off into the night. Cedric came back. All we hear is whoa, whoa, and a bunch of
Bunch of cuss words.
profanity. I took off after you running, but it took me forever to get to you. And thank goodness the horse didn't cross the road and go back to the trailer, because you could have gotten hit by a car or something. But anyway, that was pretty nuts.
It was crazy. I was prepared to jump off if it was going to the street.
Yeah, that's wild horse stuff that happens. So Damon, you got to talk about this location.
So this is a Scotch Drugstore. This was actually a food pantry in Brookhaven. And luckily they had a lot of food and other items that were donated that we could use to create the store. I know me and Karis Glenn worked on this while we were getting the props together while we were filming Bastards Crossing. And then this was a night's shoot, so I went there during the day and started setting up the set design. Then Travis came in that night and helped me do everything. We basically turned it into the store in about 2 hours.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, you see a lot of yams in the background if you really pay attention, way more yams than you probably need. But we did our best with very little to make it look like a period correct store. And what's cool about the history of this building is it was a little grocery store during my grandfather's day. It was called Cirio's Grocery. So we were kind of actually returning it to what it had been. Quick shout out here for William Shannon Williams, who plays the constable, the newly elected constable. I'd worked with him in Son of a Gun. He was awesome. So I think he nailed this character. It is a real life character.
Yeah, he's just fantastic. And I love, Travis, the way you brought in this scene, though. The reflection of the horseback riding.
Yeah.
And his eyes going across.
Right.
I mean, it sets up the whole scene, I think, perfectly, where you can see it in Shannon's eyes, and then he goes right into his character.
That's interesting that worked for you. You know that's not an actual reflection, right?
No.
So that,
It's from another scene.
he knows that.
Yeah.
But you're like an audience member because you went there when we shot it. So right outside that window is a busy street in Brookhaven. We couldn't have the horses ride on it, right? So what we did is we shot them riding on another property, and we digitally put it in as the reflection into the window. So that's kind of a cool little moment.
It works. And here comes Nick.
Yeah, here comes Nick and Ward Imling. We got to talk about Ward. This is his second of the 12 Westerns, playing a super different character than he did in Bastards Crossing. Obviously cleaned up.
Ward got skills, man. I did a play at New Stage Theater with Ward, Sweat, year before last, and man,
Yeah,
dude's incredible.
that's where I actually saw you for the
You did
first
tell
time.
me that. You
Yeah,
told me
that's
that.
where I saw you, and I
Yeah.
thought, man, he would be good. And you had worked with Herman as well. You recommended him as well, Dorsey.
Yeah, well, I'd seen you in the film. I mean, in the play there, and that Travis, I think you might have gone with me to it. I can't remember now.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you ended up doing some coaching for your daughter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But Nick, this is an introduction of your character, Graham Herring, who we should say that Cliff Herring was the newly elected sheriff in the county at this time. This is a real life character. The Herring family was supportive of the movie. We ended up shooting on their property. They're really cool, so I'm really thankful for that. And Graham, his son, was one of his deputies. So you got thrown into the deep end here because you auditioned in Jackson in July 2019, right? And then all of a sudden you're casting these movies. So what was that like?
With zero experience, getting thrown on set. It was nice meeting Cedric also on one of the first days that we were out there because he was kind of in the same boat. We felt the same way about it, but it didn't feel too daunting.
Okay,
'Cause
that's good.
I didn't know that I could fail.
There you go. You didn't know how bad you could be yet,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So
I
you're
had
just
no
kind of
idea.
coasting.
I
Wait.
thought, gee, this is going to be fun, but as we get into it, it's a heck of a lot of work, but all this enjoyable.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It was really difficult to find period correct vehicles for this movie, and I actually tried for 2 months to get this vehicle. I would go every, I think, Thursday to see this guy who owns this. He owns a grocery store in Brookhaven, and I would go and I'd say, so what do you think about us using that? He's like, typical Mississippi answer. We'll see.
Yeah.
You know? I'm like, you're going to be saying that till the day right before, but it's a really unique vehicle because it was actually like a produce truck. And the reason it has the sides open like that is they would open up and sell produce out of the back that they had loaded up. And I think the vehicle is slightly historically inaccurate, like it dates to 46 or something. But he said, just don't show the grill of the truck and no one will know. This cabin, we struggled forever. I don't know if you remember, to find a cabin for Texas
And
Red.
this is a quarter mile from your house.
Less than that, it's like a block.
Yeah.
And I just
And it's
said,
perfect.
wait a second, I think there's a place right down the street from my house. And it worked out perfect. It was owned by some friends of my buddy Bill, and it was great. It was their grandmother's old cabin.
I really enjoyed shooting this scene that night. It was
The-
freezing cold.
The atmosphere inside that cabin felt so real as far as what was going on outside. It was as real as it could be.
Just in terms of being real tense or what?
And the dialogue that was going on, of course, watching Tia and Cedric at the kitchen table and Herman there, it was you felt like you were there. It was very uncomfortable being in that scene.
Yeah. We should talk about Tia a little bit. How do you say her credited name? I always screw Equinezia. I always screw it up.
I call Tia.
Tia. Okay. Well, she was pretty incredible. She'd auditioned for me a couple times, and it was kind of just a no-brainer to cast her in this role. I don't even think I considered anyone else for her role or the Oklahoma Kid or Texas Red, because there was a big debate when writing the script of who we should cast as Red. I've told this story many times before, but when I was writing the final scene, I was listening to Spotify radio and Cedric's music came on. I said, who the heck is this? I'd only heard of his grandfather, not him. And boom, that's what planted the seed for that. And then I saw you in the play. And talk a little bit about the James Cagney thing and what I told you to do for the audition.
What I was told for the audition was to not only study James Cagney, but also have a James Cagney monologue and also have a James Cagney scene. Because I remember, first I was shocked that you filmed the auditions, and when I saw it, one thing that you said, and I quote, somebody did their homework.
Nice.
So I went in there like I really just hard-nosed. I watched like probably 4 or 5 James Cagney films just getting prepared for the role. Just trying to see, because Larry Latham is the one who actually told me, he was like, in a way, your acting style reminds me of Cagney. And I was just like, wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was just like, man, like, that's a hell of a compliment. And so when I really started watching the guy, I noticed like he's kind of expressive like I am, even though he plays all these different roles. And still a hell of a compliment. And it was awesome playing the role. And James Cagney is someone that I recommend anybody study in regards to acting, because he has a very broad range and can do a heck of a lot. And most actors nowadays don't get to show that range, but
Yeah.
the ones that do, they get those awards.
What, physically too?
Yeah,
he was
yeah,
so
yeah.
physical, almost like an athlete in his performances.
Yeah, he's very animated. Very
This-
animated.
This was a difficult scene to stage. We shot this whole sequence, them raiding Red's cabin, on one really long night in late January, early February, super cold, like we talked about. We filmed all night long until it was dawn, and I'll show you when you can see in the scene when the sun starts to rise. But it's really, anyone who's ever done a nighttime scene knows that it's really hard to work that late, but it's also hard to light on a low budget and make it look real. So I'm pretty proud of what Jared did with this.
Believe it or not, the song that you have in there right after Nick sings for Borrowed Time, I wrote the song in Cedric's minivan the night that we shot this.
Oh, nice. And you guys are trying to stay warm?
Yes, and like everybody was taking turns falling asleep. He'd be up on his phone, and I'd be asleep. I'd wake up. Tia was in the car for a little while, then she went and got her car. I guess she snored, so she didn't want nobody here. Just joking. But it was something else. It was really something else. So it brings back very fond memories.
Now, all these characters you see in this scene are supposed to be historical representations who were of people who were really there. There was someone that helped them find Red's cabin. There was supposedly a group of brothers who came there to kind of sort out their own justice. And then there was a young man who got injured in the process.
Going up to that, I mean, that scene where the kid gets shot, there is so much tension, and you know something's about to happen.
Yeah.
And you pretty much know that kid's about to get shot, but you're not sure until it actually happens.
Right.
But one of the amazing things when this story first came up, the fact that there you have a black man who's Ben Chester in real life, there with a young white boy, the irony of the situation of what the magistrate, the new, I guess, deputy sheriff is trying to do, and to have a black man there who's trying to protect or tasked with protecting the young white man.
Right.
The whole scene to me has a different flavor because of that.
Totally.
And of course, Herman comes out as there's the Oklahoma kid.
Right.
And doing his thing, but you can't get away from the fact this young kid is about to die.
Yeah.
And the historical aspect of it is that this story nobody would have known the story of Texas Red without there being somebody investigating and reporting on the life of Ben Chester.
Yeah.
Who was later murdered in an attempt to get Martin Luther King Jr. to this part of Mississippi.
Yeah.
So there's some amazing backstories, and part of this is why we even have this story, that story of Ben Chester.
It's a very intricate history, and that's something we're not going to be able to get into in the movie, but it's good for people to know.
Yeah.
Right here, you see the sun is rising. So we got this shot literally probably in the last bit of night. Usually we're fighting daylight, but this time we were fighting nighttime. And the sun was rising, and I remember thinking, oh shoot, there's no way that shot's gonna work because everybody's gonna see that it's not consistent. But, people don't think about these things. They don't see all the little mistakes that we make along the way.
Like they say, there's a theater saying, if you mess up on stage, don't stop acting because they don't know. They
don't know the lines.
They only know when you freak out.
Yeah, they only know when you break character.
Exactly.
So stay in character. That was another local vehicle from Brookhaven that we were able to use in this.
I don't know where you got the breakfast from that morning, but you had a heck of a spread. No lie.
I love that you.
When I left and I saw them unloading the stuff, I turned right on back around. He's like, "Oh, go and help yourself." I'm like, "Man, y'all about to eat this? Y'all gonna leave? Y'all gonna eat this? Y'all crazy."
I love that you remember that nearly 2 years later, and I have no recollection of what we
Man, that food was so good.
This is another scene that kind of touches on that Ben Chester
tense.
thing.
Yeah.
Well, and it kind of what he says about protecting himself kind of hints of what later would happen to Ben Chester.
Yeah.
Should call out some other actors here. Thomas Ramsey, who's in a couple more of the 12 Westerns, plays the young man.
Philip Washington.
Yeah, Philip Washington plays Ben Chester. My good friend James Minter has a little cameo here as the doctor. He was in the Porches movies. And then we had Scott Warner come out from Florida with Shannon to play one of the brothers. And John St. Clair, who's since gotten the acting bug, this was his first acting role and he plays a perfect, hateful redneck.
Yep.
So couldn't be better.
Had 1 to 10 too.
Yeah,
I usually say it right on time. Every
I
time
know.
I say it.
this is one of my favorite scenes, actually, the way it came out and the interaction between these characters, the way Tia looks through the screen door. I think it turned out really well. The music in this film is a combination of Cedric's music, Herman's music, and then also a composer named Robert Sizemore, who's based out of Natchez. And I think he did a great job of doing kind of a more traditional film score that was kind of inspired by the music from The Insider. It was also shot in Mississippi.
Yeah, I think the music is really good throughout. It works.
I remember for continuity in that previous scene, there were a lot of cigarettes going through trying to do the different takes.
Well, that's what you learn about, right, making movies, is you want to limit how much you do in a scene, because otherwise you'll end up doing it over and over and over again.
The first movie I was in was The Help, and they said, "Can somebody smoke?" And I didn't smoke at the time. I'm like, "Sure, I can." I smoked a pack of cigarettes. I'd quit for years, and I smoked a pack. I had to relight it every time.
So we're back at the Bachelor's Crossing set here.
Yes, exactly. Like Damon says, we shot this scene. This is the first scene we shot of the whole movie, because I think we had just wrapped production on Bastard's Crossing, so we're like, well, we might as well just start at that same location.
Oh, neat.
So we used it again, and we'd figured out kind of how to make it work in a unique way.
So y'all didn't really burn it down then?
No.
I had a lot of people ask me about that, and I was kind of surprised. I knew about kerosene and treating wounds and stuff like that, but not a lot of people have known.
A lot of
that was
people
a
don't
thing.
know,
I was
yeah.
wondering about that too.
Yeah, and something I've thought about doing, I might still do at some point. I've thought about doing a version of the movie with more text that comes up, like the dates, that explains little things like that. Because I think it kind of goes missing. The historical context kind of gets lost for some people. You could add stuff about Manchester and little notes, but who knows?
Then Nick, I think you do such an awesome job here. First of all, it's obvious that this was not the first time you had ridden a horse.
He was still a pretty
I'm
inexperienced.
novice,
Yeah. Well, he does a good job of controlling it for sure, and looks at ease.
But this is a moment where, if you're Nick, you know that you could get shot, but you put away your gun in the scene, and then you got Texas Red trying to figure out what to do.
I
It was
think
really
there was.
cool. I had came down and ran lines with Cedric the night before this, and so I was just like, I'm not about to go back home.
Right.
It's this. So
You had to come watch.
Yes,
right?
I came and watched a good bit of this that morning. It's really cool. to
Here's
see.
the scene with Nick
Yeah.
under the.
So that's not Nick. Not to ruin it for everybody.
My stunt double.
That's his stunt double, Bo, and then we of course put Nick back on the horse once it was safely undercover.
Bo helped out a lot learning how to ride horses.
Oh
He's
yeah,
good.
Absolutely, he's great.
And Lee.
That's a cameo by our executive producer
That's right.
Gavin Brannon walking across the street. Yeah, and another great vehicle. I'm blanking the name of your friend that brought that vehicle, Nick.
David Chappell.
David, yes, the amazing vehicle that we were able to feature. One of the blatant inaccuracies in this movie is the flag. Unfortunately.
Because there were 48 states at the time? or-
Right, exactly. So that flag is not accurate, and we had a big debate about whether to use it in the movie or not.
I'm
But
glad y'all did.
I like it.
I mean, because it's like, okay, here's America, and here's the story. And
yeah.
So, I think the juxtaposition
We hit part
works.
of the flag so you couldn't count the stars, I think, but the stripes weren't correct, I believe.
Yeah, we tried to disguise it, but I'm still glad we put it in there. But
Man, T is so good.
oh
She
man,
is amazing in this
I
role.
was slightly off frame here when I was watching Tia before this, getting ready for this scene, and it was amazing watching her prepare and working this up.
so a little story about this scene. I don't know if you guys remember, but sometimes Jared would have me operate the camera instead of him doing it, like in the blues joint and stuff like that. I was operating camera for this scene, for her close up. After she did her takes, I got up and Jared went to sit back down at the camera and he said, "This eyepiece is wet with tears."
Wow.
It's a pretty cool moment. He knew I'd been crying in the eyepiece just watching her performance because it was too powerful.
That's, yeah. I remember when we did the first reading at the end of it, when we were practicing months before shooting it, and several of us teared up at the end, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a good movie.
Yeah, you told me, you were very encouraging that night we did that reading, because you definitely like confirmed this is an important movie to make, which was really cool. You need to hear that when you're going along the crazy process of putting these things together. This is a really good scene between Nick and Ward. Shows their friendship and also just his, connection as father and son.
Well, and on some level, I think Nick's character and Ward's character are committed to following the law.
Yeah.
Not just following the law, but respecting, the reason behind the law.
Well, they have a sense of fairness. And that's what the whole idea of him putting the gun away was in that scene. I wanted to say it was like an old school sense of, you know what, I'm going to put this away. Let's just talk about it kind of thing, instead of reacting. These scenes were shot over a couple days, and we got so lucky, so thankful for all these writers who came everywhere from Alabama, all over the state of Mississippi, Louisiana. We got so much production value, and I remember it was raining those days, and we were debating about whether anyone was going to show up. And they all showed up, so it was pretty incredible.
It was a fantastic day.
Yeah, here's Nick almost hitting a tree, which was not planned, but we decided.
Cool,
and this little sequence, real quick, this horse is going down. It was also not planned. This is an incident that happened after we thought that we had safely checked the river with the riders, but unfortunately, some things are unpredictable. Thankfully, the horses were fine. You can see the whole clip in my blooper reel that's coming out soon. But it was a pretty scary incident. But I told our editor, Tony, I said, try to get some of it in the movie because it's just too
real,
freaky.
Yeah.
Real too.
It looks like
a real
it's
situation in the Homestead Forest. We've been told about quicksand our whole lives to be scared of it, but that's the only place I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Is that what it was? The horse got stuck in quicksand there?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
And they had ridden across the creek the other direction fine. And then it was on the way back that all of a sudden all three of them went down. It was pretty wild.
What was the scene with the gun being lost? Didn't we go back and have to...
So what happened was, you're outing me, Damon, because I was in charge of the gun and making sure that I took it away from Cedric and gave it back to him. Well, we ended up doing several shots where he didn't have the gun because I forgot to give it to him. And I came up to Jared and very discreetly whispered in his ear, "We have to fix my gun screw up." We have to have him drop the gun in the scene. So that's the director covering his ass, basically.
I think that Nick, you work well in this scene, just hanging back, listening. When you talk, people listen, but you're soaking it all in, trying to figure out what this posse's doing next.
Well, we would film scenes like this, and I remember everybody behind the camera was just like so impressed with Nick because he's reacting in such a subtle way. You can see everything in his eyes, just how disturbed he is by things getting out of control. I think if his character wasn't in this, it would be very hard to relate, to what's going on. Cedric did amazing in scenes like this of just capturing how difficult it was for Red to survive. Go ahead.
I remember that scene, we were all pretty jovial, but once he got into that freezing moment,
Just changed.
everybody was quiet. It was very respectful. We all felt, the character, what he was going through. It was pretty powerful stuff.
Some cameos here by my buddy Mark, who owned the property we were shooting on, and then our makeup artist's dad plays the other character. I remember you'll see this on the blooper reel too. he was supposed to spit tobacco into the water to start the shot, and every take he would spit it before I'd say action. So there's like 3 or 4 takes of me saying, no, you gotta wait for action. This is what happens when you're working with inexperienced actors, you know.
But just that scene, the casualness
That's
by
what's
which
scary.
the guy pulls up a gun to shoot another human being, you know, that says a lot in that, how casual they are, and then suddenly it's just like honey.
Yeah. Well, the whole idea that they talk about in the dialogue, they say, well, do you think that's the escaped man? They say, well, maybe not. They don't really care. If they kill the wrong guy, it's okay with them. You know, human life doesn't mean much to them, which is...
More importantly, back then, black human life meant even less.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Jennifer did an amazing job, I think. Again, just like Bastard's Crossing, she was kind of thrown into the deep end, never done special effects makeup before, so the whole idea of doing these toes, and as you'll see, they get progressively worse over time, was a huge challenge for her. And such an essential part of the movie is what happens to his feet and how that shows what he's been through. So
and now the first day I came out there, he was doing the scene backing up the hill.
yeah,
And his feet were really not in good shape by then. So the makeup is great, but there was actually some real pain he was experiencing after a while.
Just from being barefoot in so many scenes. And Cedric was such a trooper because he would do it. He was up for just about everything we threw at him. He wanted it to be real. You know, he had seen Blood Country before we first met and really liked that, which was great encouragement. But he was just so committed to making this authentic.
So that's the burlap sacks floating down the river. So
From his feet, yeah.
He loses a covering for his feet.
Lee Cannon, who's helped a ton with horses and in our southeastern movies, has a little cameo here, a couple lines. But he was also part of horse training boot camp and did great with the actors, trying to get them ready for this. I wish we'd had 2 weeks instead of 2 days for horse training, but
It's pretty good in 2 days.
what are you gonna do? Yeah.
2 weeks would have made
That
us
was one of the most fun days of my life.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell
Posse
you.
Day was great.
The Posse Day.
Oh yeah.
Well, you were thrown in the deep end with all these experienced riders, and basically you just had to keep up.
That's it. And hope
This-
it looked too bad.
This is actually Nick's wife, Katie, who was not intended to play this role, but the actress who played it backed out at the last second. So Katie was like, we were more just like, do you fit the wardrobe? And threw her in, which was quite fascinating. Now, go ahead.
Well, the scenes that y'all did earlier, going back to the posse scenes, did y'all do that from a vehicle? I mean, when you're following the posse, was that from somebody's vehicle?
It was like from a side by side. A lot of it was. Anything that was moving was from a side by side. A lot of scenes like this, we tried. I don't know if Nick kind of remembers how this was, but we tried to do it in a chaotic, not really planned way, and kind of improvise some of it, because I was thinking about Robert Altman movies and how a lot of it was improvised. So we would have a lot of ad-libbing and just kind of have characters, give them basic direction, and then just kind of, and I think it worked in that scene, and then also the scene with the American flag and the sheriff's office, and just kind of creating a hysterical type of feeling.
I always wondered on this scene right here when the lady, I always wondered what was on her mind. Did she feel like some sense of like, you know, good, I'm glad he's free. Maybe her kind of seeing a bit of herself in him.
To me, I think so. I think my direction to her was basically that she's kind of disgusted with her boss, right? And that in some way she's glad to see the guy get away.
And just his line there is so, where he says, "Is that one of ours?"
Yeah.
I mean, that's an onion that can be unpeeled forever, but it says so much about the environment and what's going on at this particular period of time.
And here, what he says, where he's like, well, you're looking for one, aren't you?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you find.
Yeah.
You know? And Nick, right here, your look and your walk away is one of the best parts of the movie, and just really shows your mentality, you know?
Fed up.
Yeah, totally fed up.
And that was filmed in Natchez, Mississippi at the Sunnyside
Yeah.
B&B.
And I should say the guy that played the plantation owner, Len Wentworth, does an incredible job with those lines, but he's the sweetest man in the world.
He
It's
really
important
is.
for people to remember that these people
Shannon is very nice too.
Oh, Shannon's
Oh
incredible.
yeah, they're all nice. This was a cool scene. I was able to operate this sort of oneer shot where we move back through the people dancing, and then eventually meet Red. These were also an incredible group of background extras who just brought so much life to it. We shot this at a place called Recess 101 in Brookhaven, which was another location that we were looking for forever for this spot. And I realized it was in my backyard.
And
you
it
know?
was perfect. We didn't have to do anything to it.
Yeah, well, we just turned off the lights, basically, you know. The place has purple walls with all these designs, and we didn't want to see that. But I love the way that this shot plays out. And if I ever did that version of the movie it added text to it, I would want to give some context of this place. I think I might be screwing up the exact name of the bar, but I think it was called the Rhythm Club.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell?
That's it.
Yeah.
The Rhythm Club, and it burned down 2 months after Red came through Natchez.
Oh, wow.
And it was a historic fire. There's a museum there, or at least a museum exhibit about it. And I think something like 200 African Americans were killed in that fire. They were trapped inside. Not all of them were able to get out. And because there was no one to deal with their bodies because of the crazy, world they were living in at the time, so many of those bodies sat on the streets in Natchez for days and days and days. It was really an awful event.
Wow.
Yeah. So I really wanted to put more of that into the movie, but it's hard to give that context. And that's part of the reason here that he says, just remember what you've got can be gone tomorrow.
Wow.
The whole set was so quiet during this scene. And then if you look around, there'd be 2 people on the right, teary-eyed.
Yeah.
Somebody on the left, teary-eyed. I know I was teary-eyed. And it was a really powerful scene. It was really beautifully shot. Really, the camera does it no justice, because if you was inside of that place and you felt the vibe, the scene, and the lights and all that stuff,
Yeah.
you were like, man. And then the guy performing was a Castro Coleman.
Yeah, Castro Coleman was incredible.
Very incredible performer. Very incredible performer. You see other actors in there like Fred Davis that was in this scene.
Yeah.
So here's Herman as Cagney right here.
Yeah. This is the return of the Oklahoma Kid. Now, there was never, at least according to Don Simonton's research, more than a decade worth of research that led to his manuscript and the script that we wrote together, there was never a confirmation that Texas Red and Oklahoma Kid met up again. But to me, dramatically, it had to happen, right? Here's these guys that love each other, they're partners in crime, they've got to meet back up before the kid escapes. And we'll talk a little bit more about it, but no one knows what happens to the kid. We kind of pose a certain theory.
Herman, talk about how you ad-libbed your apple here in a second.
Okay, with the scene here where we meet down in the basement, I stumbled upon an old knife that my grandfather used to have. And I was wondering, just like, what's something real cowboy-like I can add to this? So I asked Travis, what do you think about me eating an apple with a knife? And like I said, Mississippi answer, we'll see. Am I lying? Am I lying? You said, I was like, okay, cool.
It's true.
So I brought 2 bags of apples.
At least you came prepared.
Yes, I brought them to set, and it worked out really good. I thought everything played really good, but I practiced with it so many times before I decided, to actually try to do it on set. I tried to make sure I was fluent with it. Then when I came down to run lines with Cedric, I even practiced it there with him. I practiced tossing him the apple, all that stuff. All that stuff at at the location that he was staying when he was here.
Well, it worked. I mean, it adds to the story of the Oklahoma kid as a survivor, somebody that knows how to take care of himself and all that. I never paid attention to that except to think that was just part of his character. So good job.
I also love some of the things this scene reveals about the kid, because unlike Cedric, he's stolen a horse clearly to get to Natchez faster than Cedric. He's already been sleeping with a woman that lives upstairs. You know, it's on his journey is a little different than Cedric's, and he's still kind of being his, you know, devious self along the way. He's having fun, right? What were you gonna say, Damon?
I like how we shot this scene in the same warehouse where the sheriff's office was, and basically the piano and everything was already there. You went over and just turned up a couple blue pallets.
Yeah.
Instead of went in, everything else was just lighting, and it looks great as a basement, but it's not.
No, yeah, it's pretty crazy what we were able to do with those locations. No one would ever guess they were in the same spot. This scene was shot at the Pearl River, where we also shot the ending of Blood Country. And I should say that we were told not to even be near the Pearl River at this point. It was in flood stage. I think it was up like 18 feet.
The current was real strong.
It was incredibly strong. There was no way we could shoot at the Mississippi River and get an actor in the Mississippi River. And Herman...
We're going to get an actor in that one either. I
learned after casting him, not that it would change my mind at all, that he couldn't swim. And in the back of my mind, I always thought, is there a way to trick it out? So at the end of the scene, the person you see get in the water is actually me. We had enough daylight left for me to put your clothes on. That was funny, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, Jared, how much daylight do we have left? He says 10 minutes. I say, Herman, take your clothes off. I'm going in the water. So that was, it was fun.
Literally like 5 minutes before you got in the water, we watched the river devour like a branch the length of this table.
Yeah.
It just spiraled and then went down the side. So.
Well, as you'll notice, it doesn't show me swim very far, and that's good because as I could swim out, I kind of had this branch as like a marker, and the further I got, I started to feel the real current of the river. And that's something you just don't want to mess with. So I was like, this is where we stop and turn around. It's going to have to be, that's as good as it gets.
I really like this scene because I think it just really established like how deep their friendship was between Red and
Oh,
Kid.
yeah.
Because it was just like, they didn't want to part ways.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, Red had his pride and kids lived a more nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah.
So it just...
The kid's kind of a scrapper. He's more of a survivor. And Red's, a lot of people have still asked me, like, why does Red not escape? Why does he stay? Is it for Dolly, his wife? Is it, and part of it, I think, is what he says in that basement scene is he's like, he kind of feels like he shouldn't have to run away. Like, this is
as much as it is there.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have the right to chase me away. So it's pretty powerful. This vehicle was pretty incredible that we were able to get in the film.
These are Josh Sr.'s bloodhounds.
Yeah, that a relative of Nick's. Was he your cousin?
My wife's cousin. Yeah.
Wife's cousin. Okay, yeah, those bloodhounds were awesome, and Melvin Pittman here doing a great job as another one of the victims of this crazy racist. I don't know what you'd want to call it, venture. Johnny McPhail, kind of a legendary Mississippi actor doing his scraggly thing. He's someone who's pretty hard to keep on script, if you remember. He improvises constantly, which my editor was more of a fan of than I was.
He said he wasn't feeling well that day, so we'll give him that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was filmed in Natchez at the Garden Song.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Dan Gibson.
It's amazing how we strung these locations together. We really didn't go that far, like around the state.
Within an hour's drive.
Yeah. I really love what Melvin does here, saying that he doesn't even know Texas Red, and Nick's response kind of just showing the madness of all of this.
What's another one, I think, Nick, where your character is not always saying a lot, but always trying to catch up on other people, read their body language, read, do I believe this person? Do I know, you know, and there, you know, the character's so convincing that, you know, he's just another victim, as you said, Travis.
No,
What I was gonna say is like a lot. What I saw in Nick's character was I saw his dad's words and his actions.
yeah,
You know, like a lot what Ward was saying. I saw you not even having to verbally say it, but act it out the way he felt, and that's what I got from it. I thought that was pretty neat.
I thought it was important to represent that that is actually how the Herring family was, that they didn't want any of that to happen. He was reluctant. New sheriff didn't want that on his watch.
Well, I think that's why they were happy with the script. I think they, and the eventual film, is that I showed them the script and said, if you got problems with this, let's talk. And they're like, that's good. You can film on our property. I was like, all right, which is right here. This is their property. Your song, Borrowed Time, is playing right now. Talk a little bit about that and putting that together.
It was a pretty cool scenario. What I did was I recorded the Mississippi Crickets at night to add as like effect into the instrumentation, and I reached out to a singer that's kind of affiliated with the Mississippi Mass Choir, and had her do the vocals again. I said I wrote the song in Cedric's car, minivan at the time. Well, overnight while we were shooting that scene from earlier, and it was a very cool process because what I wanted to add was like some strong drums into the situation. I wanted it to be strong and commanding and add that sense of urgency and anticipation inside of what was going on. I think you put it in the perfect spot, especially with someone them being on the hunt and looking for someone. I think you added right to it. But the song Borrowed Time was pretty much about regardless of what the outcome is, if you're truly a legend, people know that real legends never die.
Yeah.
And that's what the main thing is. You gotta always be remembered in time.
As I told you, we had a hard time finding a spot for it in the movie, but I'm pretty happy with where it went. All these train scenes were shot at the Macomb Railroad Museum. Big thanks to them for letting us shoot there. Sadly, they've had a fire and some of it's been destroyed since. I don't think the train has, but there's Damon's cameo in the movie as a National Guardsman.
And we were supposed to have some other National Guard troops with me, but we couldn't get a response. So I wound up doing the same by myself and just saying I have a platoon of troops on standby nearby.
It's the typical Travis Mills move, is that the troops are just around the corner. If you notice, I do the same thing in Wilderness Road with John's character. The troops are just around the corner.
I love this interaction between Bill Harris and Johnny here. They really go at it.
And this was true, is that the National Guard did show up in the hunt for Red. The FBI showed up in the hunt for Red. So that was us trying to portray that, you know. And then, of course, Red on the train is one of the only digital effects in the movie. We could use a little bit of help, I think, but we don't have a big budget for visual effects here. So.
And this is actually Travis's house.
Yeah, this is my house in Brookhaven, which again, it was kind of, the longer we worked on this movie, the more we saw a lot of our locations were just in the same area, you know, and we were able to use this little outhouse in the back of my house and this little old building. It is reported that Red, in trying to warm his feet up, hid on really the property owned by this more prosperous black family, relatively more prosperous, and accidentally burned down their barn. The fire that we have in the scene was obviously something we had to be very careful with. We lit real fires. I don't know if you were...
Yeah, the propane.
Yeah, we had the propane ring, but we also had lighter fluid on burlap sacks and kind of lit these controlled fires in this really old building. So it was a little nerve-wracking at times, but I think ultimately worth it.
I remember y'all cleaning out that hut, taking all that, like that little shed, all that old stuff that was in there, man. It was really dark and muddy inside of there. I was just like, I want to see what they do with this.
Yeah, it was not easy, for sure.
I don't know if people actually burned corn on the cob back then on the cobs, but it worked. I mean, I saw that. I'm like, I bet that's authentic. So I don't know if it is or not, but
There you go.
But I've never seen corn cobs burned.
I'm glad that we
This is
it felt authentic.
That's something that could have been laying around a barn,
Yeah.
in the corner.
So this is like a propane fire ring, and then there's a real fire next to him. Some smoke.
This looks like one of those scenes
And
that
this is
later
real
Travis tells us a real story of
Exactly.
how
Burn down the cabin. Thankfully, no.
Patricia White was so great with
The
her
reactions.
reaction
Yeah.
shot here.
I really like what she did too.
Yeah.
And really like what these guys did, Rashad and I'm blanking the name of the young man right now. It's been too long, but they did a wonderful job with their reactions to this. This is definitely an ensemble movie. It has like lead performances, but so much of it is these little episodes and his interaction with the people and kind of how it all pieces together.
I blanked out earlier. The gospel singer's name is Trinae Edwards.
There you go.
That's who sung the song "To Borrow Time." Trinae Edwards.
This stuff was also shot on the property where I live, and I think kind of gives the movie a real mournful tone at this point. Kind of moves into a montage of his journey.
Can I tell y'all about an experience? It was one of the evenings that it was before we shot the, I think it was around the cabin scene. Cause Cedric it was a rhythm club scene because Cedric had his daughters in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Cedric took us to the grocery store and he gathered these ingredients to make cornbread flapjacks from scratch.
Okay.
And he made us this beef stew with the rice and the cornbread flapjacks from scratch. And I'm telling you, that tastes like something my grandmother would make.
Nice.
But he made it in a little small kitchen with a little grill.
Right, I remember where he was.
I was like, man, you whipped this up. He's like, oh man, I do this stuff all the time.
If there's nothing else that I've learned from this commentary track, it's that you remember food better than me.
I just recently lost weight, so all I think about is food all the time.
And speaking of food, this is a Jamie's pastry shop.
Yeah. Which I've used in several movies. It's not an easy place to shoot because there's so many fridges and all these sounds on that the sound is really hard to
We
control.
had to cut the breakers off, I think, and some things. Yeah.
It was wild, and I'm still not quite content with how the sound came together. But this actor did a really good job.
Calvin Williams.
Yeah, he came in pretty much. A lot of these people were cast
last
very last minute during production. Didn't have a lot of time to prepare.
Calvin been in a lot of stuff. He was in Coming to America, the second one. That just
Yeah,
came out?
he's been doing a lot of stuff. He's been staying busy.
Busy guy.
I also wanted to say, in terms of digital effects, something I forgot to mention earlier is this is actually the only one of the 12 Westerns that doesn't have blank fire in it. All of the shots were added later as computer effects mainly because we were shooting in neighborhoods, at midnight for these scenes. And it's not like you could be shooting off a bunch of blanks at midnight in Brookhaven, So we kind of had no choice but to do digital fire, which of course I do not prefer, but you got to do what you got to do.
Well, you can feel his pain here trying to.
Oh, yeah.
Can't you? I mean, when I watch this scene, it just makes you cringe a little bit.
By this time, he's just like, you know what? They halfway now. That's why he was just like, some animals don't have them anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I right now just tough it out. They leave it look swollen from right here.
Yeah.
So
Here you are.
There I am.
Here's your moment. Introduction to Dorsey's character, which is also based on a real life sheriff.
Yeah, John Millsaps Johnson. And when we did the reading, we did several characters, and Travis asked me which one I thought was me, and I said this guy, and he said, why? Well, part of it is my granddad was a deputy sheriff in Montgomery County, Winona, Mississippi, And so part of me, it could, I guess, felt familiar with law enforcement. But I'm not really a law enforcement guy. I'm more, my real life personality is more politics. I've been a candidate for office. And this sheriff is somewhere in between.
Yeah.
He's political, and he's trying to be pragmatic in certain ways, and part of that is in his law enforcement. So what I liked about the character is also what I hate about the character, which is that you know, he's a sign of the times, and he's gonna do what the governor tells him to do here. He's gonna try to keep his job, and he's gonna try to get reelected in the background.
Yeah.
But you know, and it's not that he's heartless and has no soul about it. He's just very matter of fact. And I think later you see that in the character as we get to the end.
Totally.
That this is not easy for him. I mean, there's a lot of internal strife. He makes the decisions he does, but there's a lot of inner turmoil.
And we can talk about it when we get there, but to me, your character's greatest mistake morally is your attempt to convince Coochie to go after Red.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I feel like you're maybe haunted by.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's probably the most powerful scene I've ever done. And
Yeah.
One of them is with John Maxwell there.
It was incredible.
No,
go ahead.
Well, Sylvia Galen, she's a very talented actress. I know those are granddaughters in the film. I know the younger one. I just did a short film with her. It's Keelana Haynes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And very talented individuals. Sylvia's great. Her granddaughters can act too. And this is a really cool pocket right here that you have set up for them. I thought it was very funny.
Yeah, it tries to inject some more humor into it.
Yeah, I can see it. It stands out a lot.
Well, one of my regrets is that, like, in Don's research about Red, there were a lot of folk tales in the black community while he was on the run. Stuff like when these men were chasing him, they'd be right up on him, like he's around this tree, and then they get around the tree and he turned into a squirrel.
Yeah.
Or a raccoon.
Yeah.
And it really getting into this mysticism, right? And I wish that we could have done that stuff, but we just didn't have the means to get to stage those kind of scenes. So at least that gives a little idea of the fact that the black community was talking about him and telling these little folk legends about him that might get bigger and bigger as they went. But if I had a bigger budget to tell his story, I would have told some of those because they're just pretty incredible.
I think this series of scenes here is just an amazing part of touching the soul. I mean, here he is freezing out in the woods.
Yeah.
And this was filmed in February, so it's really cold outside in all of this. And Tia just does an amazing job here, and so Cedric does too.
Real quick, I don't know if people paid attention. I didn't pay attention the first time I saw the movie. But that's you being shot every single time while they're telling that story.
Yes. That's my cameo as one of the deputies or posse members chasing him. It was fun getting shot and falling down. The way the style of this, I wanted to say real quick, is not slow motion. It's called step printing. And it's where you're kind of recording at a slower speed, I guess you could say, with the shutter of the camera, and it has a really interesting effect. And it's something that Jared came up with the idea for these dream sequences, and I think it's perfect. That blurry kind of look to things was a great move.
I think it gives a feel for where he is in regards to his fatigue. Like he's constantly moving, constantly running, probably taking cat naps and still moving. There's no telling how many miles he's traveling.
Well, how long can he sleep when
Exactly.
he's got nowhere comfortable, he's cold, and he doesn't know when someone's going to walk up on him.
Exactly.
So
I want to ask you, where did you guys shoot the part where it looks like bamboo?
Travis's house again, right behind his house.
There's a bamboo forest on the property
What?
where I live. Yeah. Well, that's why we were able to shoot that entire sequence you just shot. Every single shot was on my property because there's so much variety. Yes.
And actually one of
you
the-
got a bamboo forest behind your house?
Yeah. But one of the things, and it was probably not intentional, but when you film that scene, I mean, it actually, the contrast between where we think about bamboo,
Yeah.
being on some nice native island or something
Right.
vacation, contrast that with that scene, I think it's pretty powerful too.
This is incredible. We got to talk about this. You drive in this car.
It was a lot of fun.
So you got lost coming to this location because it's not easy to find.
Yep.
You showed up a little late. I told him, make sure that he knows how to drive this. It's a 3-in-the-tree a stick shift. And I think you said, sure, I know how to drive it. You just got in. He was rip-roaring around those country roads.
I doubt the owners of this car really would appreciate the way I was driving it at the time. In fact, in this scene, I put on the brakes and it squeaks.
When I first watched the movie, I said, all right, Dorsey. You're gonna get that fixed.
But you kind of, didn't you get a feeling that those cars were actually more off-roading than a lot of, like that car
Yeah.
was pretty much designed to go through the country.
Yeah.
You know, they were built well.
I love this dude's voice, man.
Oh my God. He's an acting legend. You talk about John.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up here in Jackson, and John was a theater actor, and he had a one-act show called Oh, Mr. Faulkner, Do You Right, that he took to Sweden, all over the world.
He did like an embassy tour and
Yeah.
went to embassies all over the world.
It's all about William Faulkner, and he played William Faulkner in it. And so just to be in a scene with him really takes up your A game. You know, I mean, he makes you a better actor. And we practiced these lines for quite some time beforehand. And every time it seemed to get more intense. So by the time we actually filmed it, both of us were in a controversial, you know, fighting mode here.
Yeah.
And I had to tone it down a little bit for this. And this is where I'm trying to talk Coochie into being, you know, to joining the hunt as a bounty hunter, and yeah, it was, I guess the fact that I have to repeat what I'd heard
Yeah.
about Texas Red, that, you know, that he had been stealing and thieving and all that. But my character
He gave
didn't
my
do that.
respect in this scene because him just being a black dude wasn't enough for him.
Yeah.
Because one of my favorite lines right there, what did this man do?
Well,
Does
the
he
thing
wanna know
about
what to
him,
do?
he's got an interesting, the character, I don't know what the real person was like, but the character has an interesting moral code because to me, he actually doesn't really care about white or black.
Right.
He's one of the only characters in the movie that doesn't care.
Yeah.
And if he's got to hunt someone, he's got to hunt them. It doesn't matter who they are. And then he goes by your word that Red is a killer.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, again, I think a lie. You're telling a lie there, and you know it's a lie. You know that there's not quite confirmation that he is a
Yeah, I don't have all the facts.
Killer.
I just know everybody else has all the facts
Yeah. But you're willing to, you know, okay, let's exaggerate.
to play into it.
You know something else that you tell in this movie is that like the age-old thing of that every time a story hits another person that it changes.
Mm-hmm.
And every time someone spoke about Red, it got a little bit more like, really? Well, he was here. I seen this. I heard he did that.
One thing about that happens nowadays.
Yeah,
And
it'll never end.
We
It'll never-
supposedly
that'll
have
never
all
end.
the information now, but it still happens. So of course it happened then. There was no fact checking at all.
This was Red going up the hill. That
Yeah.
was the last day he shot, and that's where I noticed his feet were actually hurting.
In real bad
at
shape,
the time.
yeah.
But I love the way y'all cut between these scenes here.
This was my editor's idea. One thing I love about my editor, Tony, is that I don't tell him to do this kind of stuff. So when he sends me the first cut, there's all these surprises. And he loves mixing things like that, putting things out of order. Sometimes I don't like it, but 9 times out of 10, I'm like, dude, I couldn't have thought of that in a million years. But he just has a good feeling for how these images, are juxtaposed. Whereas if I was cutting the movie, I would have just had Red walk up the hill. So it's pretty cool.
That's a special skill in itself as someone that just edits primarily.
Yeah.
And they have this form of telekinesis organization type thing. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, it's really nice that they just bring a fresh perspective to it too.
That's a better way
It's
to put
good.
it.
Well, it's good that they're not on set at all. So they're not tainted by any memories.
No bias to any scene.
Exactly. Yeah. They're just approaching the footage in an honest way.
Now here comes
Your daughter.
Bandit and my daughter.
I know.
Which is,
that's a great memory.
Yeah.
I remember this is one of the pictures that you posted. I was like, man, that's
Early
a good
on.
shot.
Yeah. This is my dog Bandit.
Oh,
And
Hayes.
Hayes Carson, yeah. In this scene that supposedly happened of Red running into a kid.
Wouldn't
Bandit.
believe
Bandit looked down the barrel.
Bandit was doing such a good job before shooting.
Oh, yeah.
And Hayes and him were just playing and all
And
that.
then as soon as we started shooting, he was done.
And then when there was action,
It
it's
was
like,
so
you gotta get up.
difficult. Now, I love this sequence of these posse members kind of going through town, everybody watching them, kind of showing the tension. One reason I like it is that this was shot in a place called Carlisle, which can't even be called a town. It's just a group of, it used to be a town, but now it's just a group of buildings. But it's probably one of the only places in Mississippi to shoot a 1940s movie where you have almost no modern things to work around. We'd had to cover up, like one or two things?
That's me.
Yeah.
Like a flagpole or something like that, maybe something.
Yeah. So we had to shoot there, and it's probably within 5 miles of where Red was actually shot. So going back there, I think was just an essential essential thing to put in the movie.
The day of shooting this felt like you were there. This felt like 1940s, going through all the characters. A lot of these shots were filmed in close in time
Yeah.
to each other, and it all, to me, it really, the whole environment felt
I
like
gotta give
this was happening.
Larry Latham another shout out. 'Cause
Yeah. Larry's
he,
fun.
Larry's a good actor, and he also has a very broad range to his skill set. But Larry told me about the film before it even began.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wasn't very experienced in the film where I did more theater stuff. And Larry was just like, when I heard about this, all I thought about was you. I was just like, God,
That's
you don't understand, man. The way I came up, you don't get people that believe in you like that. They don't tell, and if they did, they don't tell you that
Right.
way. You know what I'm saying?
no, those things are really encouraging.
Yeah, very encouraging.
It's huge. This is probably one of my favorite scenes of the movie. Red's prayer
Yeah.
is incredible. And Cedric, we found this hollow in this tree, and he snuck in there, and I don't know. That's really moving.
It's authentic. I mean, it feels so real. He does such a good job.
You couldn't have cast a more humble and honest man that the audience could really relate to.
Yeah.
You really couldn't have.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons that the movie continues to find more and more audience members is everything combined, but his performance, people just latch onto it, and whenever you have a movie where someone's being chased the whole movie, you need someone that everybody can connect to.
One of the things, and Herman, I'd kind of like you to talk about this a little bit, but Larry had a problem. A lot of us, knew that this was a story that needed telling, but it's authentic in language. It's authentic. It doesn't fit. 2021, and I know Larry struggled with that some too. And of course, his character is one of the most racist that there is. But from a black man's perspective, how did you? what were your thoughts? What were your feelings about doing this movie?
With those elements, especially.
I mean, first things first, me and Travis on even saying, like, I want you to read the script first. You're like, don't even decide until you read the script. Because I want to make sure that you're fully competent. And again, I understood, like, my grandfather was born in 1929. So I understand, like, what to expect in a situation. And I'm somebody that believes in a project being realistic and it making sense. Because, even whether it was sonically or something else, I mentioned before, like during the filming process, I was like, hey Travis, maybe we should do this because that probably make, it'll probably help out more with something that on the black side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I expected the language, and again, I had a rapport with Larry before we started shooting this. I've had a rapport with Shannon before we started shooting this. I went through a whole horse riding camp, fear camp, with Nick.
Yes.
And I've been in a whole production with Ward Emery. So it's just like, these guys, they're good at what they do, and I have a rapport, and I feel like they respect me, and I respect them. And I know this is all about making this thing realistic to shine a light on something that other people weren't abreast to. So, no, I respect it, and it's a story that needs to be told. It's different because typically when you get a film shot down south like this, it's always slavery based. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
On this, it was like, I was so proud to be a part of it because, like, again, I've said it before when we was filming, I was like, you got some guys that's shooting back. You got some guys that's defending themselves. It's not just, yism and cow in the corner and that and this is that and the third. You got, regardless of the outcome, because if you watch, like, even just for example, what's the couple that's on the run, that's always on the run in the
Bonnie and Clyde. Yeah.
Regardless of the outcome, you felt a thing for them as well.
Yeah.
And they were the bad guys.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Who in real life Coochie caught, right?
Right.
He got close to. He didn't.
But
He
he didn't shoot.
Yeah, exactly. He got him, but he didn't shoot him. Yeah, but no, I totally know what you mean. I think it is different than a lot of the Hollywood representations of this kind of history.
They don't want to tell it.
Yeah, no, they don't. This whole sequence, I have to say real quick, was shot near Meadville, Mississippi, and on this great closed bridge, Wright's Bridge. Is an incredible part of the shoot, staging this final tragic ending. And again, I think Coochie's character is so interesting. We don't know what he would have done in real life, but he's got this own moral code that has nothing to do with race, where because the guy's not armed, he gives him this gun to make it, not a fair fight, but it's like, here's something to defend yourself with. Here's something for one last fighting chance. I think that makes his character really complex.
Yeah, and knowing that, hey, why don't you take out one of these guys?
Exactly.
He doesn't care. What else are you gonna do with this gun except take out one or two of them?
It probably offended him deeply that they went through the trouble to have him track an unarmed man. It was
Right.
beneath his status.
Yeah, you couldn't catch this
Something
guy.
like that, yeah.
Well, I think he's the one character in the movie that has, if it's a Western, he has the most Western moral code, which just has to do with justice, right? Being fair. You know what I mean? You might kill someone, but you want it to be a fair fight.
And he would actually take all the steps in the duel before turning
Yeah,
to shoot. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
he's got that kind of honor. This was an interesting scene to stage. I don't know.
Yeah.
Even
No.
the
It
y'all
was
like
very
y'all-
challenging.
Yeah, no,
Even
there
the
was
y'all like y'all didn't do no work.
There's a
I did
lot.
all this. Get over there. He's over there. Get out of my sight. I just love his whole character.
His whole vibe.
And when we're doing this scene and I'm reaching out my hand to shake Coochie's and he doesn't do it, I really felt inside.
Yeah.
You know, I experienced
Well,
some emotions of shame and all of that.
Your
and
look here is great.
Yeah.
I love it. And I think it wasn't until later in the takes that we came up with the hat coming off and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's those little touches
Yeah.
that make
You
it
thinking that
different.
yourself?
I don't know. I don't know who thought of it, but and it may have just been both of us that kind of said, "What do you think about this?" But that to me was him kind of bearing down into his real soul and going, "Oh hell,
Yeah. What have I been a part of?
What have we done here?"
I like probing actors for like little
Yeah.
little
How they
nuance.
come
I'm
up
like,
with
man,
it.
You thought of that?
Yeah.
This image of him, the standoff image right here.
Which is also
Is-
painted.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It really is. And the whole prior to this, all of this feels like hunting, right?
Yeah.
You're hunting, and that's a human being, and then he goes out shooting, or at least
Trying to.
trying to.
Yeah, back to one last note on, it's interesting that, you said Larry had issues with some of the language and the content, and a couple people did. I asked Cedric and Herman and Tia how they felt about it. You all were pretty much just like, well, that's how it was. And honestly, that's the best compliment I've gotten on the movie after showing it. A couple people, I've asked them, how do you feel about how the movie turned out? And all they say is, that's how it was. I go, well, I guess we did the job.
Because the thing I appreciate about it is that there's another story to how this is a different story to how it was.
Yeah.
Regardless of the verbiage that they use, you showed a different side of what people did to get away. Just like, there's a series for the Underground Railroad. There's a series for well, you got Texas Red, where people doing something else. It's not always just. It may sound weird when I say it, but it's like when you look at the way a lot of filming goes, when they tell stories of this era, it's always a way to tell a story to keep a certain demographic from feeling prideful. And what you did was, even though Texas Red died. We don't know Dolly could have been.
But he's the hero.
But he's the freaking hero.
Yeah.
And Dolly could have been sent back to slavery for all we know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's just like, but he's still the hero at the end of it. And
Yeah.
when I read the script, I was like, man, we're going to do what we got to do. And that's it.
That's cool.
And I told you in the rhythm club, you outdid yourself.
I'm glad y'all chose black and white.
Yeah.
I said, that was
What's
sweet.
interesting is if you read this, it was in the first draft of the script.
Was it?
Yeah, it was actually in the script. It wasn't some decision we made later. I don't know why I felt that, but when I got to that point in writing, I was like, we have to change the black and white here.
You
There
got
has to
different
be a
flavor, man. That different little flavor.
yeah.
Ooh.
It works really well, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's like back to the history books.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
You see this picture in your social studies book.
It's
I wanna-
reminding the
That's
audience.
Cedric Burnside's daughter, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's
Portrica. She's great. She's got some great expressions here. I'm really thankful that all these extras, about 60 to 70 people, came out for this day of shooting, and that was not easy to get when you're asking people just to volunteer their time. And also, we shot this in Monticello, where my grandparents are originally from.
That's his cousin.
The courthouse in Meadville turned us down.
Right, we
Remember,
moved-
they
we
said
moved-
yes.
we moved location.
Yeah, and they got basically cold feet, and they said this movie's too controversial. We're not going to back you up.
That's still good.
Yeah,
That's still good.
and my cousin in Monticello is the mayor, and I called her up and I said, "What do you say?" And she says, "I love something." She loved it even more, I think, because Meadville had turned us down.
now that scene where the boy touches.
It's
the
actually
toe,
his daughter,
is that
right?
Is that your daughter? Okay.
Yeah. that's
Yeah,
what
it's
it
Nick's
is.
daughter.
But am I right? But in real life, didn't his toe fall off?
Yeah, according to one story Don saw, there was a man who kind of sent his kid over to touch him and broke off one of his toes because he was frozen. He was frozen, it was frostbite, and broke off one of his toes and potentially kept it as a souvenir, which is something that was logistically tough to pull off and also maybe a little too grotesque.
Yeah.
I mean, it's disturbing, but it might overwhelm the entire scene.
Yeah.
You know?
And we had a discussion about the kids at the end, that Megger Evers Charles Evers.
were supposedly there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and whether to include that or not, because my original script, as you remember, has that.
Yeah.
Were you of the opinion not to? I think you
I
told
thought
me.
about it, and I thought it would take away from the story of Texas Red.
Yeah.
Make it more about Meg Evans.
If even though that may be true that they were there, putting Medgar in there as a character, I think would take away from this story, at least in terms of the movie.
I'm gonna have to read you sometime the way my mentor, who's from St. Thomas, so he's also Black American, and his reaction to this movie, and it kind of has to do with this scene and the history and the true history versus history, is really cool. I'm gonna have to find his email.
Oh, yeah.
It's really cool, but
This scene is great.
for me,
Holy
the
murder.
movie ending this way is essential
Yeah.
because it has to do with what happens now.
I cried like 3 times that day.
Did you?
And you
I
break
did.
you
Like,
breaking the fourth wall is great here.
Yeah.
The writer and I debated about that last line because when I wrote it, he was a true rebel. His reaction originally was like, no, that's not right. And I'm like, no, man, it plays on so many levels. For me, that was essential, right? Especially because in the South, the whole idea of rebel, right? And kind of, what do you call it? Subverting the idea of being a rebel was really interesting. So you nailed it.
Now the song at the end is, I think, my wife's favorite part of it.
Nice.
Where she tells everybody about y'all composing this song. So go ahead and tell us.
Yeah,
about
you got to tell that story.
It was at the horse riding camp. Travis had the brilliant idea of having Cedric and I share a cabin. We got done filming. Well, we got done not filming, but we got done doing the horse riding stuff for the day. And I had some lyrics in my head the whole time. I said, in ghost on the horse like a fresh off the porch, you can ride through your course, Lord of fire is the law black. And I was just like, Cedric Burnside's a Grammy-nominated songwriter, Grammy-nominated blues singer. I've been writing since I was 5 years old. The difference, I was like, I haven't had the opportunity to put something on a platform, but I was like, you're writing just as long. I said, let me put something in front of him just to see what he says. I feel like I want to put my stamp on the movie. And I feel like besides acting, I said, music is also my first love beside acting. They're together.
Mm-hmm.
So when I wrote these lyrics and I let Cedric hit it, and when he heard it, he was just like, when did you write that? And I was like, about 2 nights ago before we came up here. And he was just like, he said, I might have to do something to that. Granted, I wake up at like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to somebody playing the guitar. Cedric is downstairs composing to the lyrics I wrote. I didn't record these lyrics for him. I didn't write these lyrics for him. He had my lyrics memorized.
Wow.
And what he did was compose something around my lyrics that I did for him maybe 2 or 3 times. And I woke up to it. So I come downstairs, got sleep in my eyes, socks on. And I'm just like, he was like, this is what I got. And I was just like, oh, I ain't gonna cuss. But I was like, oh, snap. I was like, when did you do this? He was like, man. He's like, man, but you was like my brother. And he was just like, I got up early and this was on my mind this morning, so I'm gonna go ahead and knock this out. So we had you come over the night before. Was it the night before? Or was it the
It was that night.
It was the same night. Okay, it was the same night.
You did a video of it.
Yeah, we did a voice memo. So when we wrote it, I was just like, "You think Travis will use it?" He was like, "Oh, he ain't gonna tell me. We don't know." I was like, "Man, you gotta use this." He's like, "This." I said, "This is the theme to the movie. This is the theme to the movie." They're like, "Well, let me listen to it. Let him see what he said."
It was pretty cool. I remember when, I think Damon was the one that came and told me, he said, they wrote a theme song for the movie. I'm like, what? I'm like, that was a good idea to put
20
him in the
minutes.
cabin.
Like 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Wow.
And he's that skilled. And we've sat together maybe 4 or 5 times since then and wrote songs together. It's just because.
Oh, y'all have? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Like, he's come down here and had a show, and I would go to wherever he's staying. Like, he may stay like a hotel somewhere here. He'd be like, man, I'm down here for a show. I'll go there like the night before the show, and we'll write like 2 songs.
I love it.
And then the next day I go to the show, and I was just like, man, we gotta perform this stuff, or we gotta do something. I mean, he's a very busy guy,
Yeah.
but his skill set is undeniable. I see why he came from the lineage that he came from. I see why he's accomplished the things that he's accomplished, and just being around him is inspiring, and also the fact that he's willing to even sit down and listen to anything that I've written or wrote or even entertain it lets me know that I'm not far behind.
Yeah.
And the other side for Texas Red, I think that's a very cool song, and we wrote that song in less than an hour, and he came up with the whole music concept behind it at like 6 a.m.
That's incredible, man. That's awesome. Well, we're at the end. Thank you for listening. If you've watched our commentary track, any last thoughts, or should we just end on that note?
I think we can end on that note.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, guys.